The wind howled like a restless spirit as the small boat cut through the churning waters of the North Atlantic. The sky was a bruised palette of grays and purples, heavy with the promise of rain. On the horizon, the silhouette of the island emerged, a jagged, unforgiving mass of rock that seemed to rise defiantly from the sea. At its highest point, standing like a sentinel against the elements, was the lighthouse. Its whitewashed walls gleamed faintly in the dim light, a beacon of human resilience in the face of nature's indifference. This was Blackrock Island, and for the next 6 months, it would be home to Thomas Grayson, the last lighthouse keeper. Thomas stood at the bow of the boat, his hands gripping the railing as the vessel pitched and rolled. He was a man in his late 50s, with a face weathered by years of exposure to the elements. His sultan-pepper beard was neatly trimmed, and his eyes, a piercing shade of blue, scanned the island with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. He had been a lighthouse keeper for over 30 years, but this assignment was different. Blackrock Island was one of the last remaining lighthouses, still manned by a keeper, a relic of a bygone era when human hands were needed to guide ships through treacherous waters. Automation had rendered most keepers obsolete, but Blackrock's remote location and the unpredictable nature of the surrounding seas had kept it operational until now. Thomas had been told that this would be the final season before the lighthouse was fully automated, and he was determined to see it through with the same dedication that had defined his career. As the boat drew closer to the island, the details of the lighthouse became clearer. It was a classic cylindrical tower, standing at 80 feet tall, with a lantern room at the top that housed a Fresnel lens. The lens was a masterpiece of engineering, its intricate prisms designed to amplify the light and project it far out to sea. Surrounding the lighthouse was a small cluster of buildings, the keeper's cottage, a storage shed, and a boathouse that had seen better days. The island itself was barren, with no trees or vegetation to soften its harsh contours. It was a place of stark beauty, where the raw power of nature was on full display. The boat's engine sputtered as it approached the rickety wooden dock that jutted out from the island. Thomas grabbed his duffel bag and waited for the crew to secure the lines before stepping onto the dock. The wood creaked under his weight, and he paused for a moment to steady himself. The air was thick with the scent of salt and seaweed, and the sound of waves crashing against the rocks was a constant, rhythmic backdrop. He took a deep breath, savoring the familiar sensations that had been a part of his life for so long. This was his element, his sanctuary. The crew quickly unloaded the supply crates of food, fuel, and other essentials that would sustain Thomas during his stay. They worked in silence, their movements efficient and practiced. There was no need for words. They had done this countless times before. Once the supplies were stacked on the dock, the captain gave Thomas a curt nod. "We'll be back in 6 months," he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Good luck." Thomas watched as the boat pulled away from the dock, its engine fading into the distance until it was swallowed by the vast expanse of the ocean. He was alone now, just as he had been so many times before. But this time felt different. There was a weight to the solitude, a sense of finality that he couldn't quite shake. He turned and made his way up the narrow path that led to the lighthouse, his boots crunching on the gravel. The keeper's cottage was a modest structure, with whitewashed walls and a slate roof that had been patched numerous times over the years. Inside, the air was cool and damp, with a faint musty smell that spoke of decades of occupancy. The main room was sparsely furnished, with a wooden table, a couple of chairs, and a cast-iron stove in the corner. A narrow staircase led up to the sleeping loft, where a single bed and a small desk were the only furnishings. Thomas set his duffel bag down and took a moment to survey his new home. It was austere, but it had everything he needed. After unpacking his belongings, Thomas made his way to the lighthouse. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing the spiral staircase that wound its way up to the lantern room. The air inside was cool and still, with a faint metallic taps from the iron steps. He climbed the stairs slowly, his hand brushing against the rough stone walls. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the narrow space, a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant roar of the waves. At the top of the stairs, he entered the lantern room. The Fresnel lens dominated the space, its glass prisms catching what little light there was and refracting it into a dazzling array of colors. Thomas ran his hand along the edge of the lens, feeling the smooth, cool glass beneath his fingers. This was the heart of the lighthouse, the mechanism that had guided countless ships to safety over the years. He felt a deep sense of reverence as he stood there, knowing that he was now the guardian of this ancient technology. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas lit the lamp. The flame flickered to life, its light magnified and projected out to sea. By the lens, he watched as the beam swept across the water, a steady, reassuring presence in the gathering darkness. This was his purpose, his calling. For the next 6 months, he would keep the light burning, no matter what challenges the island threw his way. But as he stood there, gazing out at the endless expanse of ocean, a sense of unease crept over him. The island felt different somehow, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He shook off the feeling, attributing it to the strangeness of being in a new place. Still, as he made his way back to the cottage, he couldn't shake the sense that he was being watched. The wind whispered through the cracks in the walls, and the shadows seemed to shift and dance in the corners of his vision. He told himself it was just his imagination, but deep down, he knew that Blackrock Island had secrets that he would soon uncover.